Daniel Rothman had learned how to keep his face still. It was the first thing they taught him in private equity. Don't react. Don't blink. Let other people reveal themselves first. Over the years, that stillness had made him very rich. Boardrooms collapsed around him, fortunes evaporated, friendships burned out, and Daniel learned to sit there as if nothing could touch him. But standing at the foot of 3 identical beds, he understood something he had never learned before. Stillness didn't stop time. The room was quiet except for the soft, mechanical hum that never fully went away. It blended into the walls now, like breathing you only noticed when it stopped. Pale afternoon light slipped through tall windows, landing on 3 small faces that looked too similar and too tired. Celia slept with her hands curled close to her chest. Rowan lay flat on her back, eyes open, staring at nothing. June pretended to be asleep, her lashes fluttering whenever someone moved. 10 years old. Triplets. Daniel's daughters. He adjusted the blanket on June's bed, careful not to disturb the thin wires hidden beneath the fabric. The nurse had warned him earlier. Any sudden movement could trigger discomfort. Pain didn't always announce itself anymore. Sometimes it arrived quietly like a shadow. "How are we doing?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice light. Rowan turned her head slightly. "You already know." He forced a smile. "Humor me." Celia stirred but didn't wake. June opened one eye. "Tuesday," June said. "Tuesdays are bad." Daniel glanced at the calendar on his phone. She was right. Tuesdays meant evaluations. Measurements. Words spoken in careful tones just outside the room. He sat down on the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped under his weight and all 3 girls felt it. Their bodies reacted before their minds did. That scared him more than anything. Once this room had been louder. Toys scattered across the floor. Arguments over who touched whose stuff. Music playing too loudly until Elena shouted from the hallway. "Elena." The thought came without warning, sharp and unwelcome. 3 years later it still felt unfinished. There had been no final conversation. No last promise. Just a phone call that broke the house in half. After she died, Daniel tried to fix things the only way he knew how. He built walls. He hired experts. He brought in the best minds money could reach. When that didn't work, he brought in more. Now the house looked like a place designed to pretend nothing was wrong. Medical equipment hid behind custom wood panels. A nurse's station disguised itself as a study. Even the air smelled too clean, like fear scrubbed into something polite. The girls noticed everything. "Dad," Celia murmured, eyes still closed. "Are they coming again?" "Yes," Daniel said. "Just to check in." Rowan let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "They always say that." Daniel didn't respond. He had heard the same phrases so many times they no longer felt like language. Progression. Management. Comfort. Quality of life. No one said the other word anymore. They didn't have to. Daniel stood and walked to the window. Outside, the estate looked exactly as it always had. Manicured lawn. Tall trees. The illusion of permanence. He pressed his hand against the glass and felt something inside him tighten. He had beaten hostile takeovers. Outlasted rivals who wanted him ruined. Built an empire out of calculated risk. And yet here he was, bargaining silently with nothing. "I'll be back later," he said, turning around. "Try to rest." June opened both eyes this time. "You say that every day." "And I mean it every time." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. As Daniel left the room, he passed the hallway where new staff were being briefed. He didn't stop. He never did. Faces blurred together now. Nurses, coordinators, assistants. Temporary fixes for permanent problems. But just before he reached the stairs, he heard something unexpected. Laughter. Not loud. Not wild. Just a quick, startled sound like it had escaped by accident. Daniel froze. It came from the direction of the service wing. He told himself it was nothing. A staff joke. A mistake. Still he turned his head. And for reasons he couldn't explain yet, he stayed standing there longer than necessary, listening as if something, or someone, had just stepped into his house that wasn't part of the plan. If this story is finding you in a quiet moment, stay with it. Sometimes the smallest interruptions change everything. Daniel didn't know it yet, but the stillness he trusted was about to be broken. The Rothman house had learned how to lie. It did it well. From the outside, it looked like a place built for celebrations. Wide stone steps, tall windows, a front door heavy enough to suggest permanence. Guests used to pause when they first arrived, letting out a small breath, as if the sight alone had already impressed them. Inside, the lie continued. The foyer smelled faintly of lemon polish and something sharper beneath it. Cling. Controlled. Too controlled. The sound of footsteps echoed just a little longer than necessary, because rugs had been chosen not for warmth, but for how easily they could be sanitized. Daniel walked the halls every morning before the house fully woke up. It was his habit now. A quiet inspection. A way to pretend he still ran things. He passed a decorative cabinet near the stairs and pressed a hidden latch. Inside, neatly arranged, were medical supplies. Gloves. Sterile wipes. Emergency medication. The cabinet closed with a soft click, returning to its role as furniture. Further down the hall, a framed landscape painting concealed a monitoring screen. Tiny numbers flickered behind the canvas, tracking heart rate, oxygen levels, patterns Daniel never fully learned to read. He didn't need to. The nurses would tell him if something changed. The nurses arrived in shifts. Calm, efficient people with careful voices and tired eyes. They spoke to Daniel the way professionals speak to someone they assume will either explode or break down. He did neither. Vitals were stable overnight, one of them said that morning, adjusting a tablet. Some discomfort around 4 a.m., but it passed. Which one? Daniel asked. All three, she replied, then corrected herself. Celia first. The others followed. Daniel nodded once. He had learned that the girl's pain often moved like a rumor. One felt it, then the others did too, as if their bodies still spoke to each other in a language adults couldn't hear. Breakfast was quiet. June pushed oatmeal around her bowl with a spoon, careful not to spill. Rowan sipped water slowly, counting in her head between swallows. Celia watched them both, her eyes tracking everything, missing nothing. Daniel sat with them, pretending to read the news on his phone. Dad, Rowan said. Are we going to the clinic today? Yes. Her shoulders tightened. She didn't argue. None of them did anymore. Resistance took energy they didn't have. The car ride was short. Silent. The clinic had been designed to feel welcoming. Soft lighting. Warm colors. Chairs that looked comfortable but weren't. The doctor spoke in measured tones. Asked questions Daniel could answer from memory now. When he left the room to consult with someone else, Daniel caught June watching the door. They always leave, she said quietly. He'll be back. June nodded, unconvinced. Back at the house, the afternoon stretched long and thin. Tutors came and went. Physical therapy sessions ended early when fatigue set in. A coordinator whispered with a nurse near the stairs, their heads bent together like they were discussing weather instead of children. Daniel retreated to his study. The room was large, immaculate, and useless to him now. Deals could wait. The world outside could burn for all he cared. He stared at an old photo on his desk. The girls at 5. Running. Elena behind them, laughing, her hair pulled back, her face alive in a way Daniel couldn't quite remember how to describe anymore. A soft knock pulled him back. Sir? A voice said from the doorway. Daniel looked up. A woman stood there holding a clipboard. She wasn't wearing scrubs. Her clothes were simple. Practical. Yes. I'm Denise, she said. From the agency. I'm here to help with housekeeping. Daniel nodded absently. Talk to the coordinator. She'll assign you. Denise hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. Daniel returned his attention to the photo, unaware that something had just shifted slightly off its usual path. Denise moved through the house carefully that afternoon. Not out of fear but awareness. She noted where the floors creaked, where voices dropped instinctively. She noticed how staff avoided the girls' room unless necessary, as if proximity itself carried risk. She folded laundry in silence. Sorted items that were too small for children their age. Paused longer than required at the doorway of the shared bedroom. Inside, the triplets lay quietly. Awake. Watching. Denise met their eyes briefly, then looked away, respecting a boundary she hadn't been taught but understood. Later, as the sun dipped low and the house settled into its evening hush, Daniel passed the service hallway again. He heard it. A voice he didn't recognize. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just calm. "It's okay to be bored," the voice said. "Means you're still here." Daniel slowed his steps. He didn't know who was speaking. He didn't know why it mattered. But for the second time that day, the house did something it hadn't done in months. It surprised him. And somewhere behind a closed door, something small and fragile shifted, as if listening. By the third week, Daniel could tell the girls apart without looking at their faces. It wasn't something he liked admitting because it meant he had learned their illness too well. The way Celia's breathing changed before she spoke. The way Rowan went quiet when pain crept up on her. The way June joked when she was scared, faster and louder than necessary. They were identical only on paper. Celia was the watcher. She noticed patterns, sounds, shifts in mood. When a nurse entered the room, Celia's eyes followed her hands, not her face. She always knew what was coming before anyone said it. When discomfort arrived, she didn't complain. She adjusted, curled inward, endured. Rowan was the thinker. She asked questions that made adults pause. Not because they were hard, but because they were honest. How long does manageable last? What happens if it stops working? Why do you whisper outside our door? The answers were always careful, never complete. June was the fighter. Or at least she pretended to be. She turned fear into humor and frustration into noise. When the therapist asked how she was feeling, June smiled wide and said, "Like a celebrity with terrible room service." Made people laugh. It made them leave faster. That morning, the girls sat propped up in bed, sunlight brushing the edges of their blankets. Denise stood nearby, wiping down a side table that was already clean. "You don't have to do that again," June said. "It's not going to get dirtier by staring at it." Denise smiled slightly. "Sometimes I clean things twice when I don't know what else to do." Rowan glanced at her. "That doesn't make sense." "Most coping mechanisms don't," Denise replied. Celia watched the exchange quietly. Her eyes narrowed, not suspicious, just curious. "Do you live here?" June asked suddenly. "No," Denise said. "I go home at night." "What's it like?" June pressed. "Your home." Denise paused. "Smaller," she said. "Louder. Less organized." "That sounds better," June said without hesitation. Denise didn't argue. Daniel observed from the doorway, unnoticed. He had stopped announcing himself when he came by. He didn't want the room to change because he was there. He watched Denise interact with the girls. She didn't hover. She didn't correct their posture or remind them of schedules. She spoke to them like people whose future hadn't already been written. That unsettled him. Later that afternoon, Celia asked to be wheeled into the sunroom. The nurses hesitated. The schedule didn't call for it. The light might tire her. "She wants to see the trees," Denise said quietly. Daniel surprised himself by nodding. "Let her." The sunroom smelled like dust and citrus. Old plants climbed toward the ceiling, leaves brushing the glass. The girls sat side by side, blankets tucked around their legs. For a few minutes no one spoke. Then Rowan said, "Do you think we were different before?" Daniel stiffened. "Different how?" "Like," Rowan said slowly, choosing her words. "Before everyone started watching us all the time." June rolled her eyes. "I liked the attention at first." Celia didn't speak. She stared at the branches swaying outside. Denise broke the silence. Sometimes, she said, people forget who they are when the world tells them who they're supposed to be. June tilted her head. Is that bad? It depends, Denise said. If you believe it. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. That evening the girls were unusually tired. The nurse chalked it up to overstimulation. Daniel nodded, though he didn't fully believe it. As Denise packed up to leave, Celia spoke. You'll come back tomorrow? She asked. Denise paused at the door. If they let me. Celia's eyes flicked to Daniel. He nodded. She'll be here. Denise smiled, softer this time. After she left, Daniel stayed with the girls longer than usual. He watched their breathing slow. Listened to the quiet. June broke it. Dad? She whispered. Yes. Do you think people stop seeing you when they think you're going to disappear? Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. I don't know, he said finally. June nodded, satisfied with the honesty. She turned on her side. As Daniel left the room, he realized something uncomfortable. For the first time in months, his daughters hadn't talked about pain, or Tess, or tomorrow. They had talked about being seen. And down the hallway, behind closed doors and polished wood, something that had been carefully hidden for a long time was starting to surface. Elena used to fill space without trying. Daniel noticed it most in her absence. How the house echoed now, even when people were inside it. How rooms felt larger, colder, like they had been hollowed out. Before, Elena had been everywhere at once. In the kitchen, arguing with June about vegetables. In the hallway, reminding Rowan to grab her sweater. In the living room, sitting on the floor with Celia, listening to a story that had no beginning or end. She hadn't been loud, just present. Her death didn't come with warning. No drawn-out illness. No time to prepare the girls with careful words. One phone call. One sentence that didn't sound real. An aneurysm. Gone. Daniel had driven home that night in silence, his hands tight on the wheel, his mind strangely blank. He remembered thinking, absurdly, that he still needed to pick up milk. The girls were already asleep when he got there. He stood in their doorway for a long time, watching them breathe, knowing something fundamental had cracked and not knowing how to explain it. The next morning, June asked where Mom was. Daniel said she was sick. Rowan asked how sick. Daniel said very. Celia said nothing. She just watched his face, memorizing it. The days after blurred together. Family flew in. Neighbors brought food no one ate. Strangers hugged him too tightly. The girls were passed from one pair of arms to another, confused, quiet. At the funeral, June tugged on Daniel's sleeve and whispered, "Why is everyone crying?" Daniel knelt and said, "Because they loved her." June frowned. "Then why aren't we?" Rowan heard that. She didn't say anything, but later that night she cried into her pillow until she made herself sick. Celia never cried where anyone could see. After Elena's death, Daniel did what he always did when things spun out of control. He organized. He hired help. Tutors. Nannies. Schedules. He learned how to pack lunches, how to braid hair badly, how to read bedtime stories with the right voices. He showed up to everything. School plays. Doctor appointments. Birthday parties he pretended were normal. From the outside, people said he was doing an incredible job. Inside, the house felt wrong. Elena's mug stayed in the cabinet for months before Daniel could move it. Her coat hung by the door through an entire winter. The girls noticed. One evening, long before the illness took hold, June asked, "If we forget her voice, does that mean she's gone for real?" Daniel didn't know how to answer that. So he said, "We won't forget." But memory turned out to be slippery. By the time the girls started getting sick, Elena felt like a ghost everyone avoided mentioning. The doctors asked questions about family history. Daniel answered. When they asked about the mother, their voices softened in a way he didn't like. Symptoms appeared slowly. Fatigue, stomach pain, weakness that came and went. At first, everyone assumed it was stress, grief, bodies reacting to loss. Daniel wanted that explanation to be true. When the diagnosis came, it felt like losing Elena all over again. Except this time it wasn't sudden. It was slow, measured, explained in charts and probabilities. Daniel learned how to listen without reacting. The girls learned how to stop asking why. That afternoon, as Denise helped June brush her hair, June caught her reflection in the mirror. "Do you think Mom would be mad at Dad?" she asked casually. "For letting us get like this?" Denise's hand paused. "I don't think mothers think like that," she said carefully. Celia looked up. "How do you know?" Denise met her gaze. "Because love doesn't keep score." Daniel heard that from the hallway. He leaned against the wall, the words settling somewhere uncomfortable. Later, when Denise had gone, Rowan spoke up. "Dad," she said, "do you think Mom can see us?" Daniel sat beside her. "I don't know." June rolled onto her side. "I hope she can't," she said. "I don't want her to worry." Celia stared at the ceiling. "Maybe she's the reason we're still here." No one responded to that. That night, Daniel sat alone in the kitchen long after the house had gone quiet. He stared at Elena's mug, still sitting at the back of the cabinet because he had taken it out again without realizing it. For the first time, he allowed himself to think something dangerous. What if losing Elena hadn't just broken their hearts? What if it had broken something else too? And somewhere in the house, unseen and unmeasured, that question began to press against everything Daniel thought he understood. The specialists never arrived all at once. They came in waves. A neurologist on Monday, a genetic counselor on Wednesday, a pain management consultant flown in from another state, her luggage still by the door when she started talking. Each one spoke with confidence shaped by caution, like they were walking on glass they couldn't see. Daniel learned their rhythms. They began with charts, numbers, terms that sounded precise but felt slippery. They spoke in percentages and possibilities, never in absolutes. When they used words like hope or progress, they paired them with conditions that drained those words of meaning. "We're focusing on comfort," one doctor said, hands folded neatly. "Stability. Reducing distress." Daniel nodded, his face calm. Inside, something tightened every time he heard the same phrases rearranged. Celia sat quietly through these meetings, her gaze drifting to the corners of the room. Rowan listened too closely, catching inconsistencies adults assumed children would miss. June counted ceiling tiles or interrupted with jokes until someone laughed and changed the subject. The doctors always noticed June last. During one meeting, a consultant leaned toward Daniel and lowered her voice. "They're remarkably well-adjusted." Daniel glanced at his daughters. "They're observant," he said. The woman smiled politely, misunderstanding him. The system ran smoothly. That was its strength. Schedules were synced. Medication times logged to the minute. Every symptom entered into a database that grew thicker and heavier with each passing week. The nurses were kind. Daniel made sure of that. He paid well. He demanded professionalism, but he never demanded silence. Still, even kindness developed limits. By the third time Rowan asked why her legs felt heavier after conversations with doctors, no one answered directly. "It's psychosomatic," one therapist said later. "Stress can manifest physically." Daniel wanted to believe that. Stress could be managed, treated, controlled. But something didn't sit right. He started noticing how the girls reacted before appointments. How their shoulders tensed when they heard certain voices. How Celia's hands curled tighter when people spoke about her instead of to her. One afternoon, Daniel overheard a nurse speaking to a colleague in the hallway. Statistically, the nurse said, "They're right on track." Daniel froze. On track for what? That night, he reviewed medical notes long after the house had gone quiet. He scrolled through terms he had memorized and still didn't fully understand. Progression curves. Expected decline. Intervention thresholds. The language was clean. Impersonal. It didn't sound like his daughter's. The next day, a new consultant arrived. Younger than the others, confident in a different way. He spoke quickly, his enthusiasm bordering on impatience. "We've seen this pattern before," he said. "The key is consistency. The more we reinforce expectations, the better compliance we see." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Expectations of what?" The consultant hesitated, then smiled. "Limitations." Celia looked up sharply. Rowan's mouth tightened. June laughed. "Wow, that's depressing." The consultant chuckled, missing the tension entirely. "Children adapt." Denise stood near the doorway, silent. She wasn't scheduled to be there. She wasn't part of the meeting. But she listened. When the consultant left, Denise didn't say anything right away. She helped June adjust her blanket. She handed Rowan a glass of water. Then, quietly, she said, "Do they ever ask how you feel after these talks?" Rowan shook her head. "They ask before." Celia added, "Before they decide." Denise nodded once, like she was filing the information away. That evening, Daniel noticed Celia winced during dinner. Not from pain, from tension. "Do you want to stop?" he asked. Celia shook her head. "I don't want them to write it down." Daniel's chest tightened. Later in the hallway, Denise spoke to him. "I don't mean to interfere," she said, choosing her words carefully. "But sometimes systems mistake predictability for truth." Daniel studied her. "Are you saying the doctors are wrong?" "I'm saying they're certain," Denise replied. "And certainty can be heavy." He didn't respond. He wasn't ready to hear that yet. But that night, as Daniel sat alone in his study, he replayed the consultant's words. Reinforce expectations. He imagined his daughters growing into the limits set for them, shrinking to fit predictions made by people who went home at night. For the first time, the system that was supposed to protect them felt like something else. A slow, quiet pressure. And Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that someone in his house was starting to see cracks he had been trained not to look for. Denise Walker did not announce herself when she entered a room. She didn't need to. Her presence settled instead of landing. Daniel noticed it most in the way the house reacted to her, how conversations didn't stop when she walked by, how the girls didn't stiffen, how even the nurses seemed to exhale a little without realizing it. It unsettled him. Most staff orbited around him carefully, adjusting their tone depending on his mood. Denise didn't. She greeted him politely, did her work thoroughly, and moved on. No lingering. No silent plea for approval. On her fourth day, Daniel watched her from the landing above the kitchen. She was wiping down the counter while June sat at the table, swinging her legs slightly. The nurse assigned to June stood nearby, tablet in hand. "I'm not hungry," June said. The nurse glanced at the tablet. "You need to eat at least half." June rolled her eyes. "My stomach didn't get the memo." Before the nurse could respond, Denise spoke, still focused on the counter. "What if you take 3 bites?" she said. "Then decide." The nurse frowned. "She needs 3 bites," Denise repeated calmly. "Then we reassess." June looked between them. "Deal." She took 3 bites, slowly. No pressure. No audience. The nurse hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. Daniel frowned. That wasn't how things were supposed to work. Later, he found Denise in the laundry room, folding clothes with practiced hands. The rhythm was steady. Familiar. "You overstepped earlier," he said. Denise didn't look up. "I didn't contradict her." "You redirected." "Yes." He waited for an apology. It didn't come. Instead, Denise said, "June doesn't resist food. She resists control." Daniel stiffened. "You're not qualified to." "I'm qualified to notice," Denise replied gently. "Anyone can be." That should have ended the conversation. It didn't. Over the next few days, Denise became part of the background of the house. Not invisible, but integrated. She learned the girls' rhythms. When to speak. When not to. She never asked questions that required explanations, Only ones that invited answers. What kind of music do you like when you can't sleep? Do you want the window open or do you just want to know it can be? Should I stay or should I pretend I forgot something and come back? The girls responded to that kind of choice. Daniel noticed small changes he couldn't quantify. June finished more meals without complaint. Rowan corrected her posture during therapy without prompting. Celia asked for books again, not medical ones but stories. One evening, Daniel found Celia sitting on the floor with Denise, sorting old photographs from a box no one had opened in years. "That's Mom," Celia said, holding up a picture. Denise leaned in. "She looks like she laughed with her whole body." "She did," Celia said softly. Daniel stood frozen in the doorway. The girls talked about Elena more when Denise was around. Not dramatically. Casually. Like she hadn't become something dangerous to mention. That night, Daniel asked Denise how long she planned to stay. "As long as I'm useful," she said. "You were hired temporarily." She nodded. "Temporary doesn't mean unimportant." Daniel didn't argue. A week later, something happened that shifted the ground beneath him. Celia had an episode in the afternoon. Not the worst they'd seen, but enough to trigger alarms. The nurse rushed in. Daniel followed close behind. Celia's breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled. "Stay with me," Daniel said, his voice tight. Denise stepped in quietly, kneeling beside the bed. "Celia," she said low and steady, "look at me." The nurse hesitated. "We need to." "Give us 30 seconds, Denise said. Daniel expected resistance. Instead, the nurse paused. Denise placed her hand on the mattress, not touching Celia, just close enough to be felt. "Match me," she said softly. Out. Her breathing was slow, deliberate. Celia's breath faltered, then followed. The tremor eased. The numbers on the monitor stabilized. The nurse stared at the screen. Daniel stared at Denise. Afterward, the nurse chalked it up to coincidence. A good moment. Timing. Daniel didn't say anything. But later that night he replayed the scene in his mind. The calm. The control. The way Denise had known exactly what to do without instructions. He opened her employment file again. Read it more carefully this time. Widowed. Caregiving background. Years of experience listed vaguely. No medical degree. But no gaps either. Daniel closed the file and leaned back in his chair. For the first time since the diagnosis, he felt something stir beneath the fear. Not hope. Suspicion. And somewhere in the house, Denise Walker folded another set of small clothes, aware that the man upstairs had finally started to look at her. Not as staff, but as a question he hadn't planned for. The bathroom at the end of the west hallway was rarely used. It had once been a guest bathroom, polished and decorative, but now it sat mostly forgotten. The light flickered slightly when you turned it on. The vent hummed too loudly. It was the kind of place people passed without thinking. That was why June chose it. Denise noticed the absence before anyone else did. Not because June made noise when she moved, she didn't, but because the house had developed a rhythm and June had stepped out of it. Denise had been carrying folded towels toward the linen closet when she felt it. Pause. A missing beat. She set the towels down and followed the quiet. The bathroom door was closed. Light leaked from underneath. No sound. Denise knocked once, softly. "June?" No answer. She waited. Counted to 3. Then she heard it. Not sobbing. Not even crying. Just breath. Broken into pieces. Denise lowered herself to June's level on the other side of the door. She didn't touch the handle. "I'm not coming in," she said gently. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't alone." Silence stretched. Then June's voice came, tight and controlled. "I am alone." Denise nodded, even though June couldn't see it. "Yeah," she said. "Sometimes that's what it feels like." The lock clicked. The door opened just enough to reveal one eye. Red. Angry. "What?" "I don't want a nurse," June said. "They'll tell Dad." "I won't," Denise replied. Not unless you want me to. June studied her for a long moment, searching for something. Pressure, judgment, concern sharpened into panic. She found none. The door opened wider. June sat on the edge of the bathtub, knees pulled to her chest. Her breathing was uneven. Her hands shook, not from pain but from holding too much in. They took my pizza away, June said suddenly, her voice cracking. It was the only thing that still tasted normal. Denise leaned against the wall instead of crouching in front of her. Same height. Same distance. That's rough, she said. June blinked. That's it. Denise shrugged. Sometimes, that's rough, is the truth. June let out a shaky laugh that collapsed into a sniffle. They said it's for my stomach. And what do you think? June stared at the floor. I think they don't like it when I enjoy things. Denise didn't respond right away. She let that sentence sit where it landed. After a moment she said, people get uncomfortable when they can't fix something. Taking away pizza feels like doing something. June picked at a crack in the tile. They keep taking stuff. First gym class. Then sleepovers. Then school. Denise nodded. Loss stacks up. June's shoulders began to shake again, harder this time. What if there's nothing left to take? What happens then? Denise's jaw tightened. Just slightly. She chose her words carefully. Then we start giving things back. June looked up, eyes wide. Like what? Denise smiled faintly. Choices. Privacy. Silence when you want it. June swallowed. Can I stay in here a little longer? Yes. Can you stay too? Denise didn't hesitate. I'm not going anywhere. They sat there for several minutes. No talking. Just breathing. June's gradually steadied, her body easing out of its defensive curl. Finally, June said quietly, they talk about us like we're not there. Denise closed her eyes briefly. I know. They don't mean to, June added quickly. But it still feels like we're already gone. Denise opened her eyes. You're here, she said firmly. Right now. That matters. June nodded, pressing her lips together. When they eventually left the bathroom, June's face was dry. Her eyes were still red, but she held her head higher. Denise washed her hands at the sink, normal and unhurried, as if nothing unusual had happened. As they stepped into the hallway, Daniel was there. He hadn't been listening. He hadn't followed them. He had just been passing by. But he saw June's face. The way she clung briefly to Denise's sleeve before letting go. The way Denise rested a hand lightly on June's shoulder. Not possessive, not protective, just present. Daniel's chest tightened. What happened? He asked. June looked up at him. Her eyes searched his face, then flicked to Denise. Nothing, she said. Denise didn't contradict her. Daniel nodded slowly, though every instinct in him screamed to demand answers. June walked back toward her room, her steps steadier than before. Daniel watched her go, then turned to Denise. You didn't call a nurse, he said. No, Denise replied. You didn't inform anyone. No. Daniel held her gaze. Why? Denise met his eyes without flinching. Because she didn't need fixing. She needed space. Daniel exhaled through his nose, conflicted. As Denise walked away, Daniel remained in the hallway longer than necessary. He couldn't shake the image of June crying in a bathroom no one monitored, or the thought that Denise had known exactly where to find her. And as the house settled back into its quiet routine, Daniel realized something unsettling. For the first time, one of his daughters had fallen apart and come back together without the system noticing at all. He wasn't sure whether that terrified him or gave him hope. Daniel heard the laughter before he understood it. It cut through the house like something out of place. Not loud, not wild, just sudden. A short burst that ended too quickly, like it had surprised the person who made it. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The sound came from the girl's room. That shouldn't have been possible. Daniel stood there longer than necessary, listening. He told himself it was a reflex. that he was making sure nothing was wrong. But he didn't move when another sound followed. A voice, low and amused, unfamiliar in that space. "Okay, that one was bad," Denise said. "I admit it." June's voice followed, sharp and delighted. "You promised a good story." "I promised a story," Denise replied. "Quality was not guaranteed." Rowan snorted. Celia laughed softly, the kind of laugh she usually swallowed before it escaped. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He took a step closer, careful not to let the floor announce him. Inside the room, the lights were dimmed for rest time. The girls were propped up against pillows, blankets gathered loosely around their legs. Denise sat on the floor with her back against the bed, a stack of folded laundry beside her. She was telling a story. Not reading. Not performing. Just talking. "And then," Denise said, holding up a mismatched sock, "I realized I had gone to the grocery store wearing two completely different shoes." June gasped. "On purpose?" "No," Denise said. "That's what made it worse." Rowan shook her head. "How did you not notice?" Denise shrugged. "I was tired. And distracted. And convinced no one was looking at my feet." Celia smiled. "Were they?" "Yes," Denise said. "Immediately." June laughed again, louder this time. It echoed off the walls, startling and bright. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard that sound. Denise continued folding laundry as she talked, her hands steady. She didn't pause to check reactions. She didn't wait for permission. She let the story land wherever it landed. June wiped her eyes. "You're terrible." "I've been told," Denise replied. "Multiple times. By people with taste." Rowan leaned forward slightly. "Tell the one about the cake." Denise groaned. "Absolutely not." "Tell it," June demanded. Celia nodded once, decisive. "Tell it." Denise sighed in surrender. "Fine. But this is confidential." Daniel smiled despite himself. Denise described a birthday cake that collapsed in the oven, smoke pouring out, alarms screaming, neighbors knocking on the door while she stood there holding a mixing bowl like evidence. June laughed so hard she had to stop and catch her breath. Rowan covered her mouth, trying to be quiet and failing. Even Celia laughed openly, her shoulders shaking. Daniel felt something twist inside him. He realized he was holding his breath. Denise finished the story with a shrug. "So that's how I learned that confidence does not equal competence." June wiped her eyes. "I like you." Denise raised an eyebrow. "I'll take it." Silence settled, comfortable and unforced. Then Rowan asked, "Why do adults stop telling stories?" Denise tilted her head. "What do you mean?" "They only tell us things when something's wrong," Rowan said. "Or when they're teaching us something." June nodded. "Or when they're trying to make us feel better." Celia added quietly, "They never tell stories just because." Denise considered that. Maybe they forget how. June frowned. "Why?" "Because when you get older," Denise said slowly, "you start thinking everything has to have a reason." Daniel shifted in the doorway. Denise glanced up and noticed him for the first time. She didn't jump. She didn't apologize. She just nodded once. A small acknowledgement. Daniel stepped fully into the room. "Am I interrupting?" he asked. June shook her head immediately. "No. She was just telling stories." Daniel looked at Denise. "Stories?" "Bad ones," Denise said. "I've been warned." Daniel smiled faintly. They didn't sound bad. The girls went quiet, watching him carefully. Adults often changed rooms without meaning to. Tone shifted. Air tightened. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed instead of standing over them. "What story was your favorite?" he asked. June grinned. "The shoe one." Rowan said, "The cake." Celia shrugged. "I liked that she messed up and nothing terrible happened." Denise met Daniel's eyes briefly. Something passed between them. Recognition. Or maybe caution. A nurse appeared at the door, tablet in hand. It's almost time to rest. June groaned. Already? The nurse smiled apologetically. You know the schedule. Daniel watched the girl's shoulders tense. Just slightly. He cleared his throat. They can finish resting in 10 minutes. The nurse hesitated. The routine. 10 minutes, Daniel repeated. The nurse nodded and stepped back. Denise began gathering the folded laundry. I should go. June reached out without thinking and caught her sleeve. Will you come back tomorrow? Denise paused. If I'm scheduled. Celia looked at Daniel. Can you make sure she is? Daniel swallowed. Yes, he said. I can. Denise smiled, softer than before. As she stood to leave, Daniel noticed something he couldn't ignore. The girls looked lighter. Not cured. Not fixed. But present. As Denise walked out, Daniel stayed behind, watching his daughters settle back against their pillows, the echo of laughter still lingering in the room. For the first time in months, the room didn't feel like it was waiting for something bad to happen. And that scared him. Because if something this small could change the air so completely, Daniel had to ask himself a dangerous question. What else had the house been missing? And who, exactly, was the woman who had found it without trying? The house felt different the next morning. Daniel noticed it before he fully woke up. The silence wasn't as heavy. It still existed, still wrapped itself around the halls and corners, but it no longer pressed against his chest the same way. He sat at the kitchen table with his coffee cooling untouched. He had slept poorly. Not because of worry, but because his mind refused to let go of the image from the night before. June laughing with her head thrown back, Rowan leaning forward as if she didn't want to miss a single word, Celia smiling without restraint. And Denise, sitting on the floor like she belonged there. Daniel rubbed a hand over his face. He was still there when Denise arrived. He heard the front door open quietly. Shoes set down carefully. A familiar, measured pace moving through the entryway. Denise appeared in the kitchen doorway, stopping short when she saw him. Oh, she said. Good morning. Morning, Daniel replied. His voice sounded rough even to him. She hesitated, then stepped in fully. I didn't expect you to be up. I didn't expect to be, he said. A small smile touched her mouth. That makes two of us. She poured herself a glass of water, then leaned lightly against the counter, waiting. She never assumed. Never filled silence unless invited. Daniel noticed that too. I watched you last night, he said. Denise looked up, meeting his eyes. No defensiveness. No apology. Just attention. They were laughing, he continued. All of them. They like stories, Denise said gently. And being treated like people. Daniel nodded slowly. I forgot that. Denise didn't contradict him. Instead she said, you didn't forget. You just had other things you were trying to survive. The words landed carefully, like she had set them down instead of throwing them. Daniel exhaled. I didn't hire you for that. For what? For whatever this is. Denise tilted her head. What do you think this is? He thought about it. About the way the girls leaned toward her. About the laughter. About how the house had shifted without permission. I don't know, he admitted. But it feels disruptive. Denise smiled faintly. Good disruption or bad? That's the problem, Daniel said. I don't know yet. Footsteps interrupted them. June appeared first, hair messy, eyes bright. You're back, she said to Denise. Denise smiled. Good morning. Rowan followed, quieter but watching closely. Celia lingered near the stairs, observing both adults with the same careful attention she used on everything else. Daniel stood. Breakfast. They moved into routine easily. Denise didn't take over. She didn't hover. She helped where asked and stepped back when not. Daniel noticed how she spoke to the girls, not simplified, not patronizing. She asked questions and waited for answers. At the table, Rowan poked at her toast. Do you think people can change? The question hung there. Daniel froze. Denise didn't rush it. I think people change all the time, she said. They just don't always notice it happening. June frowned. Even grown-ups? Especially grown-ups, Denise replied. Celia watched Daniel closely. Do you want to change? The question wasn't rude. It was curious. Daniel swallowed. I don't know, he said honestly. Denise glanced at him, then back to Celia. Sometimes not knowing is the first step. After breakfast, Daniel retreated to his office, but work didn't come. Numbers blurred. Emails went unread. Instead, he heard things. Laughter again. Not as loud as last night, but real. The sound of movement. Conversation. He stood at the doorway without meaning to. Denise sat on the floor with a deck of old cards. The girls were teaching her a game, arguing over rules with fierce seriousness. That's not how you play, June insisted. That's how I play, Denise countered. That's cheating. That's strategy. Daniel almost smiled. Then the doorbell rang. The sound cut sharp and wrong through the moment. Denise looked up. Were you expecting someone? Daniel shook his head. He opened the door. A woman stood there, impeccably dressed, posture rigid with purpose. Her eyes swept past Daniel immediately, searching the house. Where is she? The woman asked. Daniel stiffened. Who? The help, the woman said, irritation sharpening her tone. The new one. Daniel's jaw tightened. Why? The woman smiled tightly. Because she doesn't belong here. Behind him, the house was quiet again. And for the first time since Denise arrived, Daniel felt the old weight begin to creep back in. Whatever this was, whatever she had stirred awake, someone had noticed. And they were not happy about it. The woman did not wait for an invitation. She stepped into the house with the confidence of someone used to being obeyed, heels clicking sharply against the hardwood floor. Her gaze flicked to the staircase, then to the living room as if she were cataloging everything that belonged to her. Daniel closed the door behind her, more forcefully than necessary. You still haven't told me who you are, he said. She turned, finally giving him her full attention. Lydia Crane. The name rang a bell he hadn't wanted to hear. Lydia Crane. Longtime board member. Major donor to the hospital wing. Someone who smiled easily in public and crushed people quietly in private. I oversee household staffing for several families in this area, she continued, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle from her sleeve. When I heard you'd hired someone without going through proper channels, I was concerned. Daniel folded his arms. You don't manage my household. No, Lydia said calmly. But I manage people like her. The words scraped. Behind them, Denise stood in the hallway. She hadn't tried to hide. She hadn't stepped forward either. She simply stood, hands relaxed at her sides, eyes steady. Lydia turned slowly. So, Lydia said, there you are. Denise met her gaze without blinking. Good morning. Lydia's smile tightened. I told you to stay where you were. Denise's voice remained even. You told me a lot of things. Daniel's pulse picked up. You know each other. Lydia waved a dismissive hand. Barely. She worked briefly at a care facility connected to one of my foundations. Denise didn't correct her. She left without notice, Lydia continued. Unprofessional. Disruptive. And now I find her here, inserting herself where she doesn't belong. June appeared at the edge of the hallway, sensing tension before understanding it. Rowan and Celia hovered behind her. Daniel stepped forward instinctively, blocking Lydia's line of sight. This conversation doesn't involve the children. Lydia arched an eyebrow. Everything involves the children. Especially sick ones. The air shifted. Daniel's jaw clenched. What does that mean? Lydia turned her attention back to Denise. You know exactly what it means. Denise's fingers curled slightly, then relaxed. If you have something to say, say it. Lydia exhaled through her nose, annoyed. You were dismissed because you crossed boundaries. You interfered. You made people uncomfortable by pretending you knew better than licensed professionals. I asked questions, Denise replied. You undermined authority. I listened, Denise said. Daniel looked between them. What is she talking about? Lydia sighed as if indulging a child. Your maid has a habit of involving herself emotionally with fragile patients. She convinces families to hope when hope isn't appropriate. That kind of behavior creates liability. June spoke up quietly. She makes us feel better. Lydia snapped her head toward the sound. And that is exactly the problem. Daniel felt something snap. Enough, he said sharply. You don't get to come into my house and speak to my children like they're case studies. Lydia turned back to him, eyes cold. You don't understand the danger here. False hope is crueler than the truth. Denise finally moved forward, placing herself beside Daniel. Not behind him. Beside him. Truth without compassion is just another kind of cruelty, she said. Lydia laughed softly. You always did think you were special. Denise's eyes darkened. No. I just refused to be numb. Silence stretched. Daniel felt the girls pressing close behind him. He could feel June's fingers gripping his sleeve. Get out, Daniel said. Lydia stared at him. Excuse me? This is my home, he continued. Denise is my employee. You will not harass her or my children. Lydia's smile vanished. You're making a mistake. Then it's mine to make. Lydia picked up her purse slowly. I tried to warn you. People like her don't just bring comfort. They bring complications. She paused at the door, glancing back at Denise. And complications have consequences. The door closed behind her. The house remained still for several seconds. June exhaled first. I don't like her. Rowan nodded. She smells like hospitals. Celia looked at Denise. Are you in trouble? Denise knelt so they were eye level. Not yet. Daniel stared at her. What didn't you tell me? Denise hesitated. Just a beat too long. There are things, she said carefully, that people don't like remembering. And sometimes when you remind them, they try to erase you instead. Daniel felt a chill settle in his chest. Somewhere beneath the surface, something larger was moving. And Denise was standing directly in its path. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay awake listening to the house breathe. The low hum of the refrigerator. The soft tick of the thermostat. The occasional cough from down the hall, followed by the faint squeak of a bed shifting as one of the girls turned over. Every sound pulled at him. He hadn't realized how alert he'd become until he heard Denise moving quietly through the kitchen at dawn. He checked the clock. Just past 5. He got up. She was standing by the sink, sleeves rolled, hands submerged in soapy water. The window above the counter glowed faint blue, the sky still undecided about morning. You don't have to be up this early, he said. Denise glanced over her shoulder. Old habit. From where? He asked. She rinsed a plate slowly. Places where the day starts before you're ready for it. Daniel leaned against the doorway. Lydia wasn't bluffing yesterday. No, Denise said. She rarely does. She made it sound like you were dangerous. Denise smiled faintly. To systems that rely on silence? Maybe. Daniel studied her. What did you do? She set the plate in the rack and dried her hands. I stayed too long. That's it. For some people, she said, that's more unforgivable than doing harm. Before he could respond, June's voice drifted down the hall. Dad. Daniel straightened. I'm here. June appeared, wrapped in a blanket. Her cheeks were pale. Too pale. Denise noticed immediately. She always did. Did you have another bad dream? Denise asked. June nodded. The beeping one. Daniel's stomach tightened. He scooped her up, feeling how light she was. We'll talk to Dr. Hensley today. June buried her face in his shoulder. They always talk. Denise met Daniel's eyes over June's head. Something unspoken passed between them. Later at the hospital, the air felt heavier than usual. The girls lay in their beds, monitors chirping softly. Daniel sat rigid in a chair while Dr. Hensley reviewed charts on a tablet. "There's been some progression," the doctor said carefully. Celia's fingers tightened around her blanket. "That's a bad word." Dr. Hensley hesitated. "It's an honest one." Daniel leaned forward. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we need to prepare for the possibility that the current treatment plan may no longer be effective." Rowan stared at the ceiling. "So, what happens?" Dr. Hensley chose her words like stepping stones across thin ice. "We focus on comfort, on quality of life." Daniel felt the room tilt. Denise stood near the wall, quiet, observant. She hadn't been invited in officially, but no one had asked her to leave. "Not anymore." "Is there anything else?" Daniel asked tightly. Dr. Hensley glanced at Denise, then back at Daniel. "There are experimental trials, but they come with significant risk. And they're not encouraged at this stage." Denise spoke softly. "Why?" The doctor frowned. "Excuse me? Why aren't they encouraged?" Denise asked. "Is it because of outcome data or because of funding exposure?" Dr. Hensley stiffened. "And you are?" "Someone who's seen this before." The silence was thick. Daniel looked between them. "What does she mean?" Dr. Hensley cleared his throat. "There are trials that showed promise early on, but they were discontinued." "By who?" Denise asked. The doctor hesitated. "Just a fraction too long." "By the board," he said. "Due to liability concerns." Daniel's mind snapped to Lydia. To her calm certainty. To the way she'd said sick children like they were inventory. Denise stepped closer. "Were the trials discontinued because they failed," she asked, "or because the patients improved?" Dr. Hensley's jaw tightened. "That's not an appropriate question." "But it is the right one," Denise said. June looked between the adults. "Are you fighting?" Daniel reached for her hand. "No, sweetheart." Dr. Hensley straightened. "Mr. Cross, I'd like a word with you privately." Outside the room, the doctor lowered his voice. "You need to be careful who you listen to." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Are you saying she's wrong?" "I'm saying she's not a doctor." "No," Daniel said. "But she's not afraid either." Back inside, Denise knelt beside the girls. "Do you want to hear something true?" she asked quietly. Rowan nodded. "Sometimes," Denise said, "grown-ups stop asking questions not because there are no answers, but because the answers scare them." Celia swallowed. "Do you still ask?" Denise smiled at her. "Always." As they left the hospital, Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You should stop digging." He looked up at Denise. For the first time since she'd entered his life, he wondered if bringing her into his home hadn't just changed everything, but had put them all in danger. And somewhere behind closed doors, decisions were already being made about his daughter's lives. The message stayed on Daniel's screen long after he'd locked the phone. "You should stop digging." No signature. No number he recognized. He slipped the phone into his pocket without showing Denise, but she noticed anyway. She always did. The tightening of his jaw. The way his shoulders went rigid. "Someone doesn't like questions," she said quietly as they walked through the hospital parking garage. Daniel stopped beside the car. "How did you know?" Denise opened the passenger door and helped Rowan inside before answering. "Because that's usually when the warnings start." The drive home was silent except for the rhythmic click of the turn signal and the girl's soft breathing in the back seat. June leaned her head against the window, eyes closed. Celia watched the passing buildings with too much focus. Rowan traced shapes on the fogged glass. At a red light, Daniel finally spoke. "What did you mean in there?" Denise didn't pretend not to understand. "Which part?" "The trials," he said. "The board." "Lydia." Denise looked straight ahead. "I meant exactly what I asked." That wasn't an answer. "No," she agreed. "It was a warning." When they got home, the girls went straight to the living room, curling up with blankets and a movie they'd seen too many times. Daniel waited until the opening credits started before turning to Denise. "You owe me the truth," he said. Not angry. Steady. Denise took a breath. Then another. She sat at the edge of the kitchen table instead of the chair, like she might need to move quickly. "I used to work in pediatric care," she said. "Not as a maid." Daniel stayed quiet. "I wasn't a doctor," she continued, "but I was part of a research coordination team. Trials, data collection, family communication." Daniel's pulse quickened. "At the hospital?" "At several," Denise said, "including that one." The refrigerator hummed loudly in the pause that followed. "And Lydia?" he asked. Denise's mouth tightened. Lydia sat on more boards than most people sit on chairs. She controlled funding, insurance relationships, legal exposure. "You said you stayed too long," Daniel said. "Yes," Denise replied. "Long enough to notice patterns." She slid off the table and walked to the sink, bracing her hands on the counter. "Children who responded better than expected," she said. "Data flagged for review. Families encouraged to shift focus to comfort early. Trials quietly shut down before results could be replicated." Daniel's chest felt hollow. "Why?" "Because success creates questions," Denise said. "And questions create lawsuits. And lawsuits threaten foundations built on looking generous while staying safe." Daniel thought of Lydia's words. "False hope is crueler than the truth." "What did you do?" he asked. Denise turned. "I spoke up. And I was told I was overstepping," she said. "That I was emotionally compromised. That I was confusing correlation with causation." Daniel swallowed. "And when you didn't stop?" "I was let go," Denise said simply. Quietly. "My recommendations erased. My access revoked." The weight of it settled between them. "You didn't tell me because," Daniel began. "Because it wouldn't help," Denise finished. "And because people like Lydia don't forget." A sound from the living room cut through the tension. June laughed suddenly at something on the screen. The sound felt fragile like glass. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Why come here?" Denise's eyes softened. "Because your daughters reminded me of the ones who never got answers." "And what are you planning to do?" he asked. Denise hesitated. "I don't plan. I pay attention." That night, Daniel found her in the study, sitting on the floor with a stack of old folders he hadn't touched in years. Medical records, trial consent forms, letters he'd signed without reading too closely. "These were buried," Denise said. "But not gone." Daniel crouched beside her. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying," Denise replied, "that your daughters might have been candidates for something that scared the wrong people." Daniel's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Last warning. At the same moment, June screamed from down the hall. Daniel and Denise were on their feet instantly. They burst into June's room to find her gasping, fingers clawing at the blanket, eyes wide with panic. Rowan stood frozen near the door. Celia pressed herself against the wall, shaking. Denise moved first. "Come." Controlled. "Breathe with me," she said, already checking June's pulse, her breathing pattern, the monitor Daniel had learned to trust too blindly. Daniel felt fear slam into him, raw and violent. Because this wasn't on the schedule. And whatever lines Denise had crossed before, something had just crossed back. June's breathing evened out after several long minutes, but the room didn't relax with her. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, one hand gripping the mattress, the other wrapped around June's fingers. They felt cold. Too cold. Denise stood near the monitor, watching numbers that pretended to be calm while her eyes said otherwise. Rowan hovered by the doorway. "Is she okay?" Denise didn't rush the answer. "She's stable," she said. "Right now." Celia swallowed. "That's not the same as okay." No one argued. Daniel finally looked up. "Should I call an ambulance?" Denise considered it. If her oxygen drops again, yes. For now, let's not panic the system before we know what triggered this. The system, Daniel repeated bitterly. Denise met his gaze. Panic gives people excuses. We don't need that yet. She adjusted June's pillows, slow and careful, then guided Rowan and Celia closer. Sit with her, Denise said softly. Talk. Normal things. Celia hesitated. What if we make it worse? Denise shook her head. You won't. The girls climbed onto the bed, one on each side. Rowan started telling June about a ridiculous argument she'd had with a kid online over a video game. Celia corrected every detail, which made June smile weakly. Daniel watched Denise as she stepped back into the hallway. He followed. The door clicked shut behind them. What aren't you saying? He asked. Denise folded her arms. That episode didn't follow her usual pattern. His stomach dropped. Meaning? Meaning it wasn't spontaneous, Denise said. Something pushed her system. Daniel stared at her. You're saying someone did this? I'm saying, Denise replied carefully, that stress responses can be triggered chemically or environmentally. And today has been eventful. Daniel thought of the message, of Lydia's warning, of Dr. Hensley's hesitation. Is it possible, he said slowly, that whatever you're digging up is making people nervous? Denise finished. Yes. That they'd interfere with my children's care? Denise didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. They moved June to the couch later, all three girls tucked under blankets. Daniel sat with them until their eyes grew heavy. Denise stayed in the kitchen, laptop open, folders spread around her like a quiet storm. Daniel joined her. What are you looking for? Patterns, she said. Dates. Authorizations. Who signed off on what and when? He leaned closer. You're sure this is connected? Denise tapped the screen, pulling up an old approval form. This was signed the same week June's dosage changed. Daniel frowned. Dr. Hensley said it was routine. Routine for who? Denise asked. She scrolled again. Here. A review committee override. That's not standard unless someone high up intervened, Daniel said. Yes. Daniel's jaw tightened. Lydia. Denise didn't say her name, but she didn't need to. A knock sounded at the door. Both of them froze. It came again. Firm. Official. Daniel stood. Stay here. He opened the door to find two men in dark jackets. Hospital insignia on their badges. Not security. Compliance. Mr. Cross? One of them asked. Yes. We need to speak with you regarding a potential breach of care protocol. Daniel felt the house tilt. Now. It's time sensitive, the man said. His eyes flicked past Daniel, scanning the interior. Denise appeared behind him. The man's gaze sharpened. And you are? Family staff, Denise replied evenly. We've had reports, the other man said, of unauthorized medical guidance being given to patients under your roof. Daniel laughed once. It sounded wrong even to him. You're here because someone talked to my daughters? We're here, the man replied, to ensure no outside influence is compromising treatment decisions. Denise stepped forward. Then you should be asking who restricted their options in the first place. The men exchanged a look. That's not your concern, the first said. It became my concern, Denise replied, when children stopped being treated like patients and started being treated like liabilities. Daniel felt something harden in his chest. You're not taking her anywhere, he said. The man raised his hands slightly. No one is taking anyone. Not yet. Yet, Denise echoed softly. The man turned back to Daniel. You should consider limiting her involvement. For your family's sake. Daniel shut the door without responding. The lock clicked. Silence roared. Denise exhaled slowly. They're circling. Daniel looked at her. Really looked. You knew this would happen. Yes. And you stayed anyway. Denise met his eyes. Because someone has to. From the living room, June coughed. Once. Twice. Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time the message was different. Asterisk, you were given chances. This is what happens when you don't listen. Asterisk. Daniel showed Denise the screen. Her face went still. They're escalating, she said. And so are we, Daniel replied. Because whatever game was being played, it had moved past warnings. And the next move wouldn't be subtle. By morning the house felt watched. Daniel couldn't explain it without sounding paranoid, but the feeling sat on his skin like humidity. The security system showed nothing unusual. No alerts. No missed calls. Yet every time he glanced out the window, he half expected to see a car idling at the curb. Denise noticed it too. You keep checking the driveway, she said as she poured coffee. Daniel didn't deny it. They sent compliance officers to my house. They wanted to see how far they could push without leaving fingerprints, Denise replied. Now they know. The girls slept late. The episode from the night before had drained them. When June finally emerged, she moved slowly, like her body was negotiating with gravity. Denise crouched in front of her immediately. How's your chest? June shrugged. Like someone sat on it. Denise nodded. Any dizziness? Only when Dad looks scared. Daniel forced a smile. I'm not scared. June raised an eyebrow. You're lying. Denise hid a smile behind her mug. The moment passed, but the tension didn't. After breakfast, Denise pulled Daniel aside. We need to move carefully today. Carefully how? No more confrontations, she said. No calls. No messages. We gather quietly. Gather what? Daniel asked. Proof. She opened her laptop, turning the screen toward him. A spreadsheet filled with dates, approval codes, and notes written in Denise's tidy, precise handwriting. These are internal trial identifiers, she said. They're not public. But they match fragments from older records you had in storage. Daniel scanned the screen. I don't remember authorizing any of this. You didn't, Denise replied. Not fully. She clicked another file open. A scanned consent form. His signature sat at the bottom. Daniel's throat tightened. That was for routine monitoring. Yes, Denise said. That's what it was labeled as. She highlighted a clause buried deep in the document. This language allows for reassignment of treatment pathways under board discretion. Daniel felt sick. They could reroute care without telling me. They did, Denise said. And when outcomes became inconvenient, they closed the door. A knock at the front door cut through the room. Both of them froze. Daniel checked the security feed on his phone. A delivery truck. Groceries he'd ordered days ago. He exhaled and opened the door. The driver handed him the bags, cheerful and oblivious. Rough weather coming, he said, glancing at the sky. Daniel thanked him and brought the bags inside, but the sense of relief was short-lived. Inside one of the paper bags, tucked between cereal boxes, was a plain white envelope. No postage. No address. Just his name written neatly. Daniel felt his pulse spike. He looked at Denise. She nodded once. Open it. Inside was a printed photograph. June. Rowan. Celia. Taken through the window. From outside. Daniel's hands shook. They were here. Denise's voice stayed calm, but her eyes hardened. They wanted you to know. What else is in there? Daniel asked. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. Medical autonomy can be revoked for cause. Below it, another line. Choose wisely. Daniel crumpled the paper in his fist. This is intimidation. Yes, Denise said. And it's sloppy. Sloppy? He repeated. They're rushing, she explained. Which means something's close to surfacing. A sharp sound echoed from the living room. Plus, Daniel sprinted in to find Rowan standing frozen beside the coffee table. A framed photo lay shattered on the floor. I didn't touch it, she said quickly. It just fell. Denise knelt, examining the frame. The vibration from outside, she murmured. What vibration? Daniel asked. A low rumble passed through the house, distant but heavy. Sirens. Not ambulances. Police. They grew louder, closer, until red and blue lights washed across the walls. Celia pressed herself against the couch. Dad. Daniel moved toward the door as a firm knock landed against it. Police, a voice called. We need to speak with you. Daniel opened the door to find 2 officers and a woman in a tailored coat holding a tablet. Child Protective Services. The woman offered a practiced smile. Mr. Cross, we've received a report concerning medical interference and unsafe caregiving conditions in this home. Daniel's blood ran cold. That's not possible. We'd like to come in, she said. And we'll need to speak with your children. Denise stepped forward, positioning herself just inside the doorway. Not blocking. Grounding. On what basis? She asked calmly. The woman glanced at her. And you are? Someone who knows exactly how this works, Denise replied. And how often it's abused. The officer shifted uncomfortably. Daniel felt the walls closing in. Because this wasn't a warning anymore. This was removal. And as the woman took a step forward, eyes already scanning for weaknesses, Daniel realized something with terrifying clarity. The fight was no longer about treatment. It was about control. And the next few minutes would decide whether his daughters stayed with him or disappeared into a system that had already decided they were expendable. The woman from Child Protective Services stepped fully into the house, her heels quiet but deliberate. She didn't look at the girls right away. She looked at the walls, the furniture, the medical equipment tucked neatly into corners. The kind of scan that wasn't about safety but leverage. I'm Karen Witt, she began, then stopped herself, glancing at her tablet. Ms. Reynolds. I'll be brief. Denise's posture changed at the name correction. Subtle. But Daniel saw it. You're alleging unsafe caregiving conditions, Daniel said, forcing his voice to stay level. Based on what? Ms. Reynolds tapped her screen. Reports that a non-licensed individual has been providing medical guidance, interfering with prescribed treatment, and creating confusion for minors with complex health needs. Rowan's fingers tightened in the sleeve of Daniel's sweater. That's not true, Celia said quietly. Ms. Reynolds finally looked at the girls. Her smile softened, practiced. Sweetheart, we just want to make sure everyone is safe. We are safe, June added. She helps me breathe. The room went very still. Ms. Reynolds' smile faltered for half a second. And who is she? Denise spoke before Daniel could. I help them stay calm. I don't administer medication. I don't change prescriptions. That's not what the report says, Ms. Reynolds replied. Daniel felt anger rise. Who filed it? I can't disclose that. Was it Lydia Crane? He pressed. Ms. Reynolds didn't answer. She didn't need to. One of the officers cleared his throat. Mr. Cross, this doesn't mean removal. Not yet. We need to assess. Assess what? Daniel snapped. My daughters are sick, not neglected. Ms. Reynolds raised a hand. Sir, please lower your voice. Denise stepped closer to the girls, placing herself between them and the stranger. You're not here to assess, she said calmly. You're here to intimidate. Ms. Reynolds' eyes hardened. Careful. No, Denise replied. You should be. Daniel turned to the officer. Am I being accused of a crime? The officer hesitated. No. Then you don't get to question my children without my consent. Ms. Reynolds inhaled sharply. Refusal can be interpreted as non-cooperation. And intimidation can be interpreted as misconduct, Denise said. Especially when timed after compliance officers, anonymous threats, and unauthorized surveillance. Ms. Reynolds froze. Surveillance. Daniel pulled the photo from his pocket and dropped it on the table. The image slid face up. The officer leaned in. His expression changed. Who took this? Ms. Reynolds' jaw tightened. That's not part of our file. Then someone went off script, Denise said softly. Which means this visit isn't as clean as you'd like. Silence pressed in. Ms. Reynolds straightened. We're here because a concerned party believes these children are being given false hope. June lifted her chin. Hope doesn't hurt. Ms. Reynolds looked at her. Sometimes it does. No, Denise said. Hopelessness does. The officer shifted again. Ms. Reynolds, maybe we should. She cut him off with a look, then turned back to Daniel. I'll need you to sign a temporary agreement limiting outside influence. Daniel stared at the form she held out. You want me to cut her out? For now, Ms. Reynolds said. Until the investigation concludes. Denise met Daniel's eyes. There was no pleading there. No expectation. Just resolve. Daniel felt the weight of every decision he'd ever outsourced settle onto his shoulders. No, he said. Ms. Reynolds blinked. Excuse me? No, he repeated. You don't get to isolate my children from the one person who's been asking the questions no one else will. Ms. Reynolds' voice cooled. Then we may have to take further steps. Denise stepped forward. Before you do, you might want to check your tablet again. Ms. Reynolds frowned. Why? Because while you were driving here, Denise said, a formal inquiry request was submitted to the State Medical Review Board, with supporting documentation. Ms. Reynolds' fingers moved quickly over the screen. Her eyes widened despite herself. What is this? She asked. Public records, Denise replied. And a few things that were never meant to be. The officer leaned in again. This mentions trial suppression. And coercion, Denise added. And misuse of protective services to enforce compliance. Ms. Reynolds' face flushed. This is highly irregular. So was photographing sick children through a window, Daniel said. A long pause followed. Ms. Reynolds lowered the tablet. This visit is concluded for now. For now, Denise echoed. The officers backed toward the door. Ms. Reynolds lingered, eyes flicking once more to the girls. This isn't over, she said quietly. I know, Denise replied. That's why it's starting to scare the right people. The door closed. Daniel locked it with shaking hands. The girls clustered around Denise without thinking. June leaned into her side. Rowan grabbed her hand. Celia rested her forehead against Denise's arm. Daniel watched them chest tight. You sent that inquiry? He asked. Denise nodded. Last night. While you were with June. Without telling me. You needed plausible deniability, she said gently. Daniel laughed once, breathless. You're already planning 3 steps ahead. Denise looked tired now. I had to. Because if they take my daughters. They won't, Denise said firmly. Not now. Daniel met her eyes. How do you know? Because people who rely on silence panic when the noise starts spreading. Outside, a car engine turned over. Then another. Daniel glanced out the window. 2 vehicles sat at the curb. Unmarked. Watching. The pressure hadn't lifted. It had shifted. And whatever Denise had unleashed into the light was big enough that it no longer belonged to just one house. Which meant the next move wouldn't come from a warning, but from someone desperate enough to make everything disappear. The unmarked cars stayed until dusk. They didn't move. Didn't hide. Just sat there like punctuation marks at the end of a sentence no one wanted to finish. Daniel closed the blinds, one window at a time. Each soft click felt like an admission of fear. Inside, the house held its breath. The girls were in the living room, blankets pulled up, pretending to watch television. No one was following the plot. June kept coughing softly into her sleeve. Rowan counted the ceiling lights over and over. Celia watched the hallway, alert in a way no child should have to be. Denise moved through the house with quiet purpose. Not pacing. Preparing. Daniel finally followed her into the study. She was on the phone, voice low. Yes, she said. I have it. No, not yet. I need confirmation first. She ended the call and looked up. We're running out of time. Daniel crossed his arms. You've said that before. Yes, Denise replied. This time it's literal. She turned her laptop toward him. On the screen was a secure inbox, messages stacking faster than she could open them. Medical review boards, she explained. 2 journalists, 1 advocacy attorney, and someone inside the hospital who finally decided not to stay quiet. Daniel's chest tightened. Is that good news? It is, Denise said. Which is why it's dangerous. She clicked a message open. A spreadsheet appeared, dense with data. These are outcome comparisons, she said. Children with the same markers as your daughters. Same baseline. Same projected decline. And? Daniel asked. And some of them improved, Denise said. Not miraculously. Not cured. But stabilized. Enough to change the trajectory. Daniel stared. Why wasn't this continued? Because the improvements didn't fit the narrative, Denise said. And because they couldn't control where it would lead. A sound cut through the room. Glass again. Not breaking. Tapping. Daniel turned sharply toward the front of the house. Denise was already moving. She pulled the curtain back just enough to see. One of the unmarked cars was gone. The other had its window down. Someone was watching. Denise let the curtain fall. They're narrowing their options. What does that mean? Daniel asked. It means intimidation didn't work, she said. And exposure is getting closer. The front doorbell rang. Daniel flinched this time. He hated that he did. Denise caught his arm. Let me. No, Daniel said. This is my house. They went together. On the porch stood a man in an expensive coat, hands visible, posture carefully neutral. He looked like someone who belonged in boardrooms, not neighborhoods. Mr. Cross, he said smoothly. May I come in? Daniel didn't move. Who are you? A representative, the man replied. Of several interested parties. Denise stepped into view. The man's eyes flicked to her, then back to Daniel. We'd like to make this easier, he continued. For everyone involved. Daniel laughed bitterly. You've got a strange definition of easy. The man smiled. Withdraw the inquiry. Publicly reaffirm trust in the current care team. Limit outside influence. And my daughters? Daniel asked. They'll continue receiving excellent care, the man said. Comfort. Stability. Denise's voice was calm. And silence. The man ignored her. You're a reasonable person, Mr. Cross. You understand risk. Daniel leaned closer. You photographed my children. The smile faltered. Just slightly. That was regrettable. Leave, Daniel said. The man straightened. If you proceed, consequences will follow. Denise stepped forward. They already are. The man's gaze sharpened. You think you're protected? No, Denise replied. I think you're exposed. The man studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. Good luck. He walked away. The remaining car pulled off minutes later. The street went quiet. Too quiet. That night, June's fever spiked. Not dangerously at first. Just enough to raise alarms. Denise sat beside her, cool cloths, measured breaths, counting seconds between coughs. Daniel hovered uselessly. Talk to her, Denise said without looking up. About what? Anything, she replied. She needs to hear you. Daniel took June's hand. It was warm now. Too warm. I'm here, he said, voice breaking. I'm not going anywhere. June's eyes fluttered open. Promise? Yes, he said immediately. I promise. Denise glanced at him sharply but said nothing. Later, when June slept again, Denise pulled Daniel into the hallway. They might try to force hospitalization, she said. Emergency custody under medical necessity. Daniel's stomach dropped. Can they? They can try, Denise replied. Which is why we need to act before morning. Act how? Denise hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. This contains everything, she said. If something happens to me, you give it to the attorney whose number is taped to it. Daniel stared. What do you mean, if something happens to you? Denise met his eyes. I mean they won't stop at pressure forever. Daniel felt cold spread through him. You're talking like you're expendable. Denise's voice softened. I've been expendable to them for a long time. From the bedroom, June coughed again. Harder this time. Daniel turned back toward the sound, fear clawing up his throat. Because whatever protection daylight offered was gone. And the night had always been where this system did its quietest damage. By dawn, June could barely sit up. Her skin was slick with sweat. Her breathing came in shallow pulls that didn't seem to fill her lungs. Denise knelt beside the bed, eyes locked on the monitor she had brought from the living room. This isn't just a fever, Denise said softly. Daniel stood behind her, hands clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Call an ambulance. Not yet, Denise replied. Not yet. His voice cracked. She can't breathe. She can, Denise said. Barely. But if we call now, they'll take her to the hospital that already flagged her case. And that's bad because Lydia controls who sees her, Denise said. And what they're allowed to try. Daniel looked down at June, then back at Denise. So what are you saying? I'm saying there's a narrow window, Denise replied. Before protocols kick in. Before emergency custody can be justified. That sounds like kidnapping, Daniel snapped. It sounds like buying time, Denise said. For all three of them. Celia stood in the doorway, pale but steady. Is June dying? The word hit the room like glass. Denise looked at her. June is fighting. Rowan stepped closer. Are we losing? Denise didn't lie. Not yet. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Daniel didn't know if they were coming for them or not. Felt like they were. Denise moved quickly now, checking June's oxygen levels, counting her breaths. We need to get her stabilized, she said. Enough to make the transport safe. Transport where? Daniel asked. To a clinic that isn't on Lydia's leash, Denise replied. Daniel's heart pounded. Do those even exist? Yes, Denise said. But not on any map you've seen. She reached into her bag again and pulled out a small vial and a syringe. Daniel recoiled. What is that? A bronchodilator, Denise replied. Not experimental. Not illegal. Just not the one she's currently on. Who gave it to you? Someone who finally remembered why they became a doctor. Daniel's voice shook. If this goes wrong. If this goes wrong, Denise said gently, it was already going wrong. June whimpered. Denise knelt beside her. This might sting, she said softly. But I need you to stay with me. June nodded weakly. Denise administered the injection with steady hands. For a terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then June coughed. What? Air rushed into her lungs like it had been waiting. Daniel let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Rowan grabbed Celia's hand. She's breathing. Denise checked the monitor. Better. Not safe, but better. Daniel looked at her. You just crossed the line. Yes, Denise said. And they've been crossing it for years. A car horn blared outside. Long twice. Denise's head snapped up. That's our ride. Ride. Daniel repeated. To the clinic, she said. We have about 15 minutes before someone realizes her vitals changed. Daniel stared. They're watching the monitors. Yes, Denise replied. Which is why we can't let them decide what the change means. The girls were already moving, adrenaline overriding exhaustion. Denise wrapped June in blankets while Daniel grabbed keys and bags with shaking hands. As they rushed out the back door, Daniel glanced down the street. A black SUV idled at the corner. Its headlights turned on. Denise pushed June into the waiting van in the alley, a battered vehicle that looked like it belonged to a plumber. "Get in," she said. Daniel hesitated. "What if this is a trap?" Denise met his eyes. "Then it's one we walk into together." The van door slid shut. The engine roared. As they pulled away, the black SUV lurched forward. Rowan looked out the rear window. "They're following us." Denise's jaw tightened. "Of course they are." Daniel held June close as her breathing steadied against his chest. Because whatever chance they had left was speeding down an empty road. And someone very powerful had decided they were not allowed to reach it. The van tore through the early morning streets like it was running from something it couldn't see. Daniel held June against his chest, feeling each shallow breath as if it were his own. Rowan and Celia sat on the bench seat across from them, pressed together, eyes wide, silent. Denise knelt on the floor between them, one hand braced against the side of the van, the other checking June's pulse. "They're still behind us," Rowan said, peering through the back window. Denise didn't look. "Let them be. Let them be." Daniel snapped. "They're trying to take my kids. They're trying to stop us from getting somewhere they can't control," Denise replied. "That's different." The van made a hard turn, tires squealing. June whimpered. "Easy," Denise murmured. "Stay with me." Sirens wailed in the distance. Not police. Ambulances. Or maybe both. It was impossible to tell anymore. "Where are we going?" Celia asked. "Somewhere small," Denise said. "Somewhere that still remembers people are not spreadsheets." The driver never spoke. He didn't need to. His eyes stayed on the road like it was the only thing that mattered. The black SUV appeared again in the rear window, closer now. "They're gaining," Rowan whispered. Denise reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She tapped once. "Now," she said quietly. Ahead of them, a traffic light changed at the perfect moment. The van slipped through just as it turned red. The SUV was forced to stop. For a breath, the world felt suspended. Then the light turned green again. The SUV surged forward. "Damn," Denise muttered. The van took another sharp turn, then another, cutting through a maze of side streets. Daniel felt the vehicle sway beneath them. June stirred. "Dad." "I'm here," he said, pressing his forehead to hers. "I'm right here." Denise checked her again. "Her oxygen is holding. We need 10 more minutes." 10 minutes feels like a lifetime," Daniel said. "Then don't think about it," Denise replied. "Think about her next breath." The SUV disappeared for a moment. Rowan let out a shaky laugh. "We lost them." Denise didn't relax. "No. We confused them." A sudden jolt threw them forward. The van skidded. The driver swore under his breath. Ahead, the road was blocked by construction. Orange barriers. A dead end. "Turn around," Daniel shouted. "Can't," the driver said. "Too tight." The SUV reappeared at the far end of the street. Slow. Confident. "They knew," Denise whispered. "They rerouted us." The SUV stopped, blocking the only way out. 2 men stepped out. Not police. Not hospital. Something else. Daniel felt panic claw at his chest. "This is it." Denise stood, steadying herself as the van rocked. "No," she said. "This is what they wanted you to think." She opened the side door before anyone could stop her. The men froze. Denise stepped out, hands visible. "You're not going to do this in front of children." One of the men smirked. "You think that matters?" "Yes," Denise said. "Because you don't want witnesses." The man hesitated. Just a fraction. Denise used it. She pulled something from her pocket and threw it onto the pavement. A small device skittered to a stop. "What is that?" Daniel shouted. "Insurance," Denise replied. The device began to beep. The men looked at each other. The driver slammed the gas. The van lurched forward, crashing through the flimsy barrier at the end of the street and onto a narrow service road hidden behind it. The SUV couldn't follow. Daniel grabbed the bench as they bounced wildly. Denise leapt back into the van, breathless but smiling. That device. Daniel gasped. GPS beacon, she said. It just sent their location to 3 journalists and a civil rights office. Rowan stared at her. That's sneaky. Denise winked. That's survival. The van sped through the service road, finally emerging onto a quiet highway. No SUV behind them. June coughed, then took a deeper breath than she had in days. Denise checked the monitor. We're almost there. Daniel felt tears burn his eyes. You're risking everything. Denise looked at June. So are they. Ahead, a small, unmarked building appeared, tucked between trees. The driver slowed. We made it, he said. But as the van rolled toward the clinic, Denise's phone buzzed. Her face changed when she read the message. Daniel saw it. What is it? Denise swallowed. Lydia knows where we are. And whatever fragile lead they had just gained had already been compromised. The van slowed as it turned into the gravel drive, tires crunching softly under the weight of everything they just escaped. The building ahead didn't look like much. 2 stories. Faded brick. A hand-painted sign that read Riverside Family Clinic. No corporate logo. No glass walls. Just a place that looked like it had been standing there long before anyone thought to monetize hope. Daniel's heart hammered as the driver pulled to a stop. We're here, he said. Denise slid the door open and jumped down first, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved. No black SUV. No sirens. For a moment it felt unreal. Then June coughed again and reality rushed back. Let's go, Denise said. They moved fast. Daniel carried June inside while Rowan and Celia clung to his jacket. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee. A woman in scrubs looked up from the front desk, eyes widening when she saw June's color. Room 3, she said without needing to be told. Within seconds, June was on a bed, oxygen mask in place. A gray-haired doctor entered, calm but sharp-eyed. I'm Dr. Alvarez, he said. You must be Denise. Denise nodded. Thank you for doing this. He glanced at the monitor. We'll see what we can do. Daniel stood frozen as machines were connected and numbers filled the screen. Every beep felt like a verdict. Rowan whispered, Is she going to die? Denise knelt in front of her. Not today. Dr. Alvarez looked over his shoulder. We need blood work. And I want to compare this with her previous charts. I have them, Denise said, already pulling the flash drive from her bag. The doctor nodded. Good. Because what she's been on doesn't make sense. Daniel's head snapped up. What do you mean? Dr. Alvarez hesitated, then spoke carefully. Her treatment protocol was shifted away from the more aggressive option months ago. That's what Denise said, Daniel replied. Yes, the doctor agreed. And it was wrong. A wave of anger and relief hit Daniel at the same time. Denise's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it, then tucked it away. Bad news? Daniel asked quietly. Expected news, Denise replied. Lydia knows where we are. Dr. Alvarez frowned. Then we need to move faster. Can she be helped? Daniel asked, voice barely steady. The doctor looked at June, then at Daniel. There are no guarantees. But she should never have been written off. Daniel felt his knees weaken. Outside, a car engine rumbled in the distance. Denise's eyes flicked toward the window. The race wasn't over. But for the first time, June was in a place where someone was actually trying to save her. And that was enough to make every enemy they had furious. The clinic didn't go quiet. It held a different kind of tension. The kind that lived between beeping monitors and whispered conversations, between a nurse's soft footsteps and the steady rhythm of machines keeping someone tethered to the world. June lay still under thin blankets, oxygen mask fogging slightly with every breath. Dr. Alvarez and a nurse moved around her with quick, precise motions. Blood was drawn. Vials were labeled. Charts pulled up on a screen that Denise had already connected to her flash drive. Rowan and Celia sat on a small couch across the room, knees pulled to their chests. Daniel stood between them and the bed as if his body could somehow shield all three. "What are they doing?" Rowan whispered. "Trying to find out what they've been hiding," Denise replied softly. Dr. Alvarez frowned at the data scrolling past. This doesn't line up." "With what?" Daniel asked. "With her supposed decline," the doctor said. "Her markers show stress, yes, but they don't show irreversible failure." Denise leaned closer. "Because she was never supposed to get this far on what they gave her." The doctor nodded grimly. "Someone throttled her treatment." Daniel's hands curled into fists. "So they were killing her." "They were letting her fade," Dr. Alvarez said. "There's a difference, but not one that matters to a parent." Outside, a car door slammed. Denise's head snapped up. "They're here." Before Daniel could react, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Dr. Alvarez swore under his breath. "We don't have time for this." The door to the clinic burst open. Lydia Crane walked in like she owned the place. Two men followed her. "Daniel," Lydia said smoothly as if they were meeting for lunch. "This has gone far enough." Daniel stepped forward. "Get out." Lydia smiled thinly. "You brought her here. You signed forms you didn't read. You gave us authority. And you abused it," Denise said, standing beside him. Lydia's eyes flicked to her. "You're still here." "Someone has to be," Denise replied. Lydia looked at June. "She's in distress. This facility is not authorized to handle her care." Dr. Alvarez stepped forward. "She's my patient now." Lydia laughed softly. "You think that protects you?" Denise reached into her bag. "No. This does." She pulled out her phone and hit play. A voice filled the room. Lydia's. "Close the trial. The parents don't need to know why. Liability first." Silence slammed down. Daniel stared at Lydia. "You recorded me?" Lydia hissed. "And sent it," Denise replied calmly, "to 3 reporters. And the medical board. About 10 minutes ago." Lydia's composure cracked for the first time. "You don't know what you've done." "Yes," Denise said. "I do." Sirens wailed outside. Not ambulances. Police. Dr. Alvarez looked at Denise in awe. "You planned this." Denise shook her head. "I hoped for it." Lydia backed away slowly. "This isn't over." "It is for you," Denise replied. The doors burst open again, this time with uniformed officers and investigators. "Lydia Crane," one of them said, "you're under arrest pending investigation for medical fraud and endangerment." Lydia's gaze burned into Denise as she was cuffed. "You think this saves them?" Denise didn't flinch. "I know it gives them a chance." As Lydia was led away, June stirred. Her breathing grew stronger. Dr. Alvarez smiled faintly. "It's working." Daniel felt tears slide down his face. For the first time in months, the machines didn't sound like a countdown. They sounded like a promise. And whatever Lydia had built in silence was finally being pulled into the light. The only question now was how much damage it had already done, and whether June, Rowan, and Celia would survive long enough to see what came next. June woke up to sunlight. Not the harsh white glare of hospital lights, but real sunlight filtered through thin curtains and dust in the air. For a moment she didn't remember where she was. Then she felt the steady pulse of the 4 in her arm and the soft weight of a blanket across her legs, and everything came rushing back. The clinic, Denise, her daughters. She turned her head slowly. Rowan and Celia were asleep in chairs beside her bed, faces smudged with exhaustion, still wearing the same hoodies they'd thrown on in the middle of the night. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting lightly on June's arm, afraid to squeeze too hard in case he hurt her. "You're awake," he whispered, like he was afraid the words might scare her back into sleep. "Am I?" June croaked. He laughed, a broken, breathless sound. "Yeah, you are." Her throat burned. "The girls?" They're okay. You scared them half to death, but they're okay. June swallowed. The doctors? Lydia? Daniel's jaw tightened. Gone. Taken away in handcuffs. June closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process it. I knew something was wrong, she murmured. They kept changing my medication. Every time I started to feel a little stronger, it changed again. You weren't imagining it, Daniel said. You were being slowly pushed toward the edge. Rowan stirred and lifted her head. Mom? June turned toward her. Hey, sunshine. Rowan rushed to her side, gripping her hand carefully, like she was made of glass. You're really here. I'm not going anywhere, June said softly, though the words still felt fragile in her mouth. Celia blinked awake next, taking a second to understand, then letting out a shaky laugh. You look less gray. That's not the compliment you think it is, June teased weakly. It was the first time in months any of them had smiled. Later, Dr. Alvarez came in with a clipboard and a look of cautious optimism. Your latest labs are better. Not perfect, but better. How long? Daniel asked. Too early to say, the doctor replied. But now that she's getting what she was supposed to all along, we're finally fighting the right battle. Denise arrived just after that, carrying a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. They're charging Lydia with enough to keep her busy for years, she said quietly. The media picked it up. Quietly for now. But it won't stay quiet. Daniel stood. You saved my family. Denise shook her head. I just stopped someone from destroying it. She hesitated, then looked at June. There's something you should know. June studied her. You look like you're about to ruin the mood. I might, Denise said gently. Your treatment plan, the one that Lydia sabotaged, was expensive. Obscenely expensive. The kind of expensive people usually don't approve unless someone pushes hard. Daniel frowned. What are you saying? Denise took a breath. There was a donor. Anonymous. Someone who insisted the triplets get everything they needed, no matter the cost. June felt a chill. Who? Denise met her eyes. Your mother. The room went still. That's not possible, June whispered. She left when I was 13. She didn't even come to my wedding. She never stopped checking on you, Denise said. She used to trust to stay out of sight. When the girls got sick, she doubled it. June's eyes filled with tears. So she was there, the whole time? Yes. Daniel squeezed her hand. Do you want to find her? June stared at the ceiling. I don't know. But I think I'd like her to know we're still here. The weeks that followed weren't a miracle. There were bad days. Painful days. But there were also mornings where June could sit up without help, and evenings where the girls could argue over what to watch instead of whispering about funerals. Daniel stopped going to the office. For once, the billions could wait. One afternoon, Rowan looked straight at the camera that Daniel had set up to record a message for family. If you're watching this, she said shyly, my mom's still here. And so are we. So maybe don't give up on people too fast. Daniel smiled. If you've been listening to this story and felt something shift inside you, maybe it's because real people fight these battles every day. And if you want to keep hearing stories that remind you of that, don't forget to like and subscribe. Sometimes staying connected is how hope stays alive.